Yes, hello and welcome into another episode of Five Rounds here on the Five Reasons Sports Network, talking everything combat sports for the next 90 minutes. Remember, Five Rounds is proudly served to you by the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. Ooh, it's been like a fortnight since I've been out to the Quarterdeck. I want to get back. I'm not even sure how long a fortnight is. Is that 2 weeks? It's been about 2 weeks since I've been out at the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. I am craving that delicious seafood, guys. The oysters and Maine lobster, the buffalo shrimp. That's my favorite appetizer on the planet. I love the sushi at the Quarterdeck. Building my own poke bowl is such a thrill. I love the burgers. I love the sandwiches. The baby back ribs are so delicious and so tender. Make sure you save at least a little room for dessert because the key lime cheesecake is the perfect way to finish every meal. The Quarterdeck has 2-for-1 happy hour all day, every day. That literally never ends. During football season, they've got the 5 for $15 ice cold bucket special. The Heineken family of beers, so nice imported beers, High Noon Seltzer, mix and match them to your heart's content. 5 for $15 ice cold buckets on college football Saturdays and on NFL Sundays. It is a beautiful thing with the TVs covering every wall. And of course, our audience is very interested in this, I'm sure. You can watch every UFC pay-per-view fight at the Quarterdeck for zero cover charge. You pay nothing at the door. If you want to find the location nearest to you or just peep their menu before you go, check them out online at quarterdeckrestaurants.com. The Quarterdeck, come for the food, stay for the fun. And my friends, we're going to have later in the show another gift card giveaway. I'm holding in my hands. This is currency right here. This is a $20 Quarterdeck gift card. Look how beautiful it is. We will be giving this away later on to a lucky listener. We're going to wait to get a little bit more traffic to make sure everybody has a chance to get in and win, but we will be giving away this Quarterdeck gift card. I know that we're all probably trillered out after the wonderful boxing we had this past weekend. Let me introduce my co-host as always. First, making the triumphant return, was away on business last week. He might have just dipped out on us to go watch Anderson Silva, Vitor Belfort, and go and watch Evander Holyfield looking so wonderful at the age of 58 years old. James Walker is back. James, how are you, man?
I'm happy to be back, and it's actually been about a fortnight since I was last on the show. So just to tie all that in.
That is 2 weeks, right? A fortnight?
I think it's about 12 days, but
okay.
Yeah, not exactly sure.
I just remember, I just remember on Game of Thrones, like whenever somebody had to go from like the north down to King's Landing, it was going to take about a fortnight. I just wasn't sure how long a fortnight actually was. And another big Game of Thrones fan, although I don't know if he hated the finale like I did, Frank Zaffere is with us at @RealFrank_Z. Has the Twitter follower count gone up since you put up the velvet ropes?
No, nothing works. So as you can see, second show in a row, no Twitter handle there in the title. I'm just doing everything the opposite just to see if that helps.
I mean, but if people don't know where your account is, they're not going to follow you is the thing. I don't know what you're expecting. I do tag you in some tweets, though.
I appreciate that. So far, there's been no interest.
And Frank, let me start with you because I had to laugh a little bit when I was watching the final two fights on that Triller event. You were the guy who told me that Evander Holyfield was going to have no problem with Vitor Belfort. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Dude, I felt so bad for Evander Holyfield. And I know that one of our guests tonight, he's going to be the second on the show to join us. We'll talk about this a little bit with both of our guests at 7 o'clock or around 7 o'clock. He's got to finish up a little bit of work at around 7, maybe 7:05, 7:10. Kevin Iole from Yahoo Sports is going to hop on with us. He's a Hall of Fame boxing writer and mixed martial arts writer. And he absolutely hates the celebrity fights and the novelty fights like what we got. But, Frank was trying to tell me, oh, no, Evander Holyfield, one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. Vitor's not really a boxer. Holyfield's going to have no problem. Frank, it was so sad. Evander Holyfield, literally, he missed a punch, spun around, and nearly fell out of the ring. It was one of the most embarrassing things I've ever seen.
If the competition had been that's not a great visual right there. If the competition had been who looks best for their age, he wins, hands down. But once they actually began to box, whatever has happened cerebrally for him over the many years of competition, I mean, it was horrible. He knocked himself down with a punch. And then Vitor went after him, and with the kind of malintention that we would have expected from Vitor. And fortunately, the referee had more compassion than even you, and this did not want to see it last another second. Was probably quietly upset that it had even been allowed to happen. I got that sense from the way it was being reffed that referee didn't think Evander Holyfield should be there and was looking for the very first opportunity to get him out.
Yeah, and even like the commentators, it was Sean Wheelock, former Bellator commentator. I wasn't sure about the play-by-play voice, but I know I've heard him 100 times. And then like 50 Cent was part of the broadcast team, and like and they were trying to debate whether that was a bad stoppage, and like Evander Holyfield should be upset that they stopped the fight. No, Evander Holyfield should be thanking that ref for saving his life. Like, you thought that was a bad stoppage? What do you think is going to happen if they let him keep fighting? 45 seconds before that, the man literally missed a punch and nearly fell out of the ring. And you're telling me you thought that was a bad stoppage? James, what did you think about that whole farce?
It was a bad idea to even start the fight. Really, forget.
It wasn't a bad stoppage. It was a bad start.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly my point. And this goes to show that too much of anything is a bad thing. And I'm not a Triller hater, per se. Like, I know there's a lot of people out there, but I thought that they were kind of balancing things to a pretty good degree, to where, you throw out Jake Paul every 6 months or so. There's a lot of interest in things like that, but you don't need a card. They don't need to be the UFC. You don't need a card every 2 weeks, a Triller card every 2 weeks, where you're just throwing these mix and match celebrities and things like that together for a fight. Just having a card every 6 months, pack it up with some quality, throw a few curveballs in there like a Chad Ochocinco and stuff like that kind of draw interest. Jake Paul, which is obviously going to draw interest, but I think this kind of showed the organization that, hey, pump the brakes. Don't just throw everybody out there every 2 weeks to have a Triller card and just to, try to generate interest. They were doing fine, at a slower pace. So they don't need to try to, throw a card out if they're every 2 weeks.
Can I ask you both a question, though? What do you think if Oscar De La Hoya had not gotten sick? How do you think he does against Vitor?
Much better, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if it would have been lopsided the other way, if it would have been one of the typical embarrassments that some of the MMA guys suffer when they try to box. I wonder if it would have been a just completely different story for Belfort. Because Belfort's calling out everybody but the title holders in boxing now, as if he's, slayed the dragon, completely unrecognizing the condition that Evander Holyfield's in.
Right, yeah. It's like completely ignore the fact that this guy has been punch drunk for the last 15 years. But no, I mean, I've got to think De La Hoya would have done a lot better. Like, De La Hoya, first, he's not nearly as far removed from his prime as Evander Holyfield. He's considerably younger than Holyfield. And just James, De La Hoya, he's still coherent. Like, this is something, and you were gone last week, but one of the big things I was harping on last week was, I've interviewed Evander Holyfield, and this was 6 or 7 years ago, and I thought he sounded bad then, right? He sounded like the typical, late 50s, or I guess mid 50s at the time, you punch drunk, slurring the words. You just knew, oh my God, all the wars, all the punishment this guy took has taken the toll. We were reading the account of former UFC fighter Brendan Schaub, who said before that fight that he had recently been around Evander Holyfield, and that the guy can he can't walk in the right direction. He had to have a handler to lead him around, because he just wow. Unfortunately, all the headshots the guy has taken, it's not there for him. He never should have been allowed to fight. So yeah, I am thankful that referee saved him, and the Florida Commission slapped him with a 30-day athletic suspension. They should have gone for a 30-year to life athletic suspension, because he should never be allowed to compete again.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how much did he really train? He was a late.
Well, he didn't. That's why I was gonna say, James, you were right on the money. They didn't need to do this event this way. Yeah. If Oscar wanted to bring Holyfield in as an attraction at some point, knowing his limitations, certainly Oscar De La Hoya is in the know in terms of the condition Evander Holyfield's in, or at least he has better information than we do. Giving the guy more than 3 days to prepare would have been a good idea. And certainly Silva and Ortiz would have been enough, right? For this card.
Frank had me believing in Holyfield.
Yeah, I did.
And speaking of Silva versus Ortiz, that was a lot of fun. I got to tell you, that was a lot of fun. Tito, he probably thought, oh, I'm doing so well, because he had Silva backed up in the corner. Never mind the fact that Silva likes doing that. Like, you remember some of the big fights that Silva won in the UFC, like against Stephan Bonner, where he allows you to walk him down, and you think this guy's against the fence, or in this case, he's in the corner. I should be able to hit him because he's got nowhere to go, but the head movement is on point. Tito is obviously not a good boxer anyway, so he's just swinging and missing. Silva's moving ahead, and then Silva hits him with this like sneaky hook. You could barely see it. I had to like rewind it like 3 times. Like, what did he hit him with? He hit him with this sneaky right hand. It didn't look like even a power punch. And Tito Ortiz takes a freaking dirt nap. It was so beautiful. The face plant that he did was basically a representation of his short-lived political career, where he was like vice mayor for like 3 days in Huntington Beach. And even though he was employed by the government, he tried to apply for unemployment and got caught doing that. It's a representation of the Tito political career. But that was a lot of fun. And James, the funny thing about that was, that one punch was just like so sneaky and so out of left field. People are actually accusing Ortiz and Silva of like fixing the fight, or accusing Ortiz of throwing the fight. I certainly don't think that was the case. I just think that Tito is that washed, and Anderson Silva, I'll give him credit, is actually pretty good at boxing. Yeah,
and you brought up the point that I was going to bring up, that the punch was so good that people were questioning whether or not it was real or if it was fixed. I saw the immediate reaction on social media after that knockout, to where I'd say probably 70% of people were like, that's Tito just took a dive on that one. But that's Anderson Silva. That's people that don't know, Anderson Silva. He's unconventional. That's how he wins. And he's always had knockout power as an MMA fighter, but I think something that's helped him on the boxing side is the smaller gloves, to where even though he's older in age and may not have as much power as he had in his prime, the smaller gloves have kind of negated that. The boxing gloves, the thinner gloves kind of negated that, to where now, his punches hit a little harder, hit a little different than they did, in his latter years in the UFC.
And James, I would go further, and I would say that the gloves are also helping him, because he's lost a step. That elusiveness in the games he would play in the corner in mixed martial arts, he'd lost the split second that he needed to stay dominant that way. But in boxing, with the more padding, he can get back to taking those risks of being that elusive, bait you into the corner kind of fighter that's so electric to watch. I mean, it's almost as if he's resurrected himself in this new sport. Of all the people that are pretending to be boxers right now, I'm most excited about Anderson's potential for the next couple of years.
And so we are going to, during this episode, we're going to look ahead to a UFC card. The UFC is back this weekend. It's not a huge fight, I'm not going to lie to you, but I am interested in the light heavyweight featured attraction between Anthony Smith and Ryan Spann. I'm getting a little. I'm getting some apathy here on the panel. Are you not looking forward to this one very much, James?
No, I mean, it's another one of those fight night cards that they could do without, and we've said this on the show multiple times. Why jam pack every single week when you can put 3 of these cards together into one pretty powerful free card? And I don't know if we're going to talk about the main event right now, but like you said, pretty decent main event. Anthony Smith has been a title challenger, but it seems like in his last 3 or 4 fights, he's always fighting these rising prospects now. Seems like they kind of have him in that role as kind of a gatekeeper role to see if the next guy up can kind of come and break through to be that next title challenger. So I think that's kind of the spot that Spann is in right now. Spann, I believe, is 4-1 in the UFC. 5-1 the year. He has a pretty good record.
And the one loss that he had was he was actually doing really well against Johnny Walker, and then he smashed him with those elbows while Spann was shooting for a takedown. Hold on, I want to put the pin in the grenade because I want to get back to this main event. In about 17 minutes, our good friend Dean Thomas is going to join us. I have been begging Dean for weeks to set up the start of Frank Zaffere's training, because we're going to get Frank Zaffere into the MMA gym. And when I first texted Dean about this a couple days ago that we wanted to set this up, I said, hey, I'd love to get together. We can talk about putting together a training session for Frank. His response was, tell Frank to go kick rocks. That is the start of his training, was his response. And so now Frank has been he's been kicking rocks for the last couple weeks. By the way, I want to find the culprit here. I don't know if it might be me. I don't think it's me though. Somebody's got some background noise. Does anyone want to step up and tell us where the background noise is coming from?
I'm in a working office right now, so it could be me.
Okay, could be you. Could be. All right, fair enough. Fair enough.
Apologize.
It's all right. I don't really care, but Manny was complaining about, there's me in my tinfoil hat. There's Evander. Okay, so before we're going to bring on Dean Thomas in about 15 minutes. Before we get to that, we re-debuted this old segment last week. So this is fresh. This is like how, they remade Hawaii 5-0, Magnum PI, MacGyver, all that. We are remaking here the reboot of The Toss-Up. Frank, you have anything for us?
I do. Sorry, I went on mute there, so I didn't piss Manny off anymore. All right, first question. 4-time title challenger Joseph Benitez announced his retirement this week. Is he the best UFC fighter to never win a title? Benavidez, I apologize.
He's
I
honestly,
went back to boxing there for a minute.
Yeah, no, he's up there. And yeah, Joe Benavidez, and I was watching an interview with him this week. He basically said, I've known for a while I was going to retire, but then he finally had to this week. He had to file the paperwork. Like, he had to let the UFC know. He had to let USADA know to take him out of the testing pool. So then once he started doing that, he decided to announce it publicly. He's on the short list, guys, of best fighters to never win a title, because unfortunately his prime, because he's still been fighting the last few years, he's been out of his prime. He's still a good fighter, but out of his prime. His prime years, you had one of the most dominant champions of all time in Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, who he just couldn't get past. I definitely put Benavidez in the conversation. I think, though, the guy that I might lean to as the best UFC fighter to not win a title in the UFC, let's make that clear. Titles from other organizations don't count for this conversation. I might give a shout to Uriah Faber, because Uriah Faber, he was a dominant champion in the WEC. And then by the time he got to the UFC, the Jose Aldo era had started. Faber also tried to move down to bantamweight and get a belt. I think he had like 3 unsuccessful title challenges. But since Uriah Faber, he was the top dog in his weight class for a few years, I don't think Joseph Benavidez ever was. He was always just right on the outside looking in. I might go to Uriah Faber being up there. But what do you guys think? Oh, and I don't know. I even considered putting the Diaz brothers in there, but they were never that close to being champions, unfortunately. So I think I go Uriah Faber. Kenny Florian, I think, can also be in that conversation. He had several failed title challenges in a couple different weight classes, but I think I might go Uriah Faber. What do you think, James?
Yeah, I think Faber's a really good pick. Benavidez, as you mentioned, in the short list, probably top 5. I can't really think of that many other people. Maybe some of the Pride guys that came over, maybe a Nogueira,
Dan Henderson,
or something like that. Dan Henderson, yeah, Dan Henderson. I would definitely put up there. At the top, especially he had a really good run outside of UFC in Pride, and then also here with when he knocked out Fedor and stuff like that.
Yeah, Strike Force.
Yeah, I would probably put Dan Henderson, Faber ahead of Benavidez, but Benavidez definitely in the top 5.
Yeah, Dan Henderson's a good shout as well. What do you think, Frank? Best fighter to never win a UFC title?
It's such an obvious answer, and I can't believe neither of you said it. It's Chael P. Sonnen.
Is it though?
He's never lost.
Yeah,
won a title but never lost.
Cheating aside, look, everyone he was fighting was cheating as well. It has been revealed later on, although the Teflon Don, Anderson Silva, that stink never seems to stick to him. But I thought Chael Sonnen, and then, look, everyone knows the man crush I had. I got to throw a shout out to Damian Maia. If it hadn't been for egregious cage grabbing by Tyron Woodley, he might have finally grabbed the gold that he so desperately wanted. So, and now he's released. So I guess that's over for him, right? Yeah. Damian Maia out of the league. Yeah. All right. Ready for the next question?
Yes, sir.
We just watched a 58-year-old, almost 59-year-old Evander Holyfield lose to Vitor Belfort after a decade of inactivity. What's the most ridiculous celebrity boxing match of all time?
I don't know.
Easy too.
I think I don't know. You and I might be on the same page on this one. Now, I don't know how this was received before it happened, in the buildup, but I've watched this fight on YouTube a few times. Muhammad Ali against Antonio Inoki. That dude, that is up there. And I think there was a wacky rule that Inoki was a famous Japanese pro wrestler. And they had this wacky rule in place where Inoki wasn't allowed to strike Ali above the waist which is kind of ridiculous. So like he's allowed to punch Inoki in the head and Inoki's not allowed to punch him. So Antonio, this was like the worst fight of all time. So Antonio Inoki, his strategy was he sat on his butt for the entire fight and tried to sweep Muhammad Ali's legs while Muhammad Ali just stood up and taunted him for the entire fight. Like I felt so bad for the announcers commentating the fight because I've been in the booth before calling fights. And when a fight is like really bad and really boring, it's just hard. Like it is really hard to call a terrible fight and a farce of a fight. And they got an entire fight of that ridiculousness. So I think that's up there for me. Muhammad Ali, Antonio Inoki.
Yes, interesting take. And this wasn't a celebrity fight per se, but it was a gimmick fight, and it was in the UFC. I'll go James Toney against Randy Couture. You remember that?
Good
and
one.
They were kind of defending that this is, Randy Couture is defending MMA, this whole sport of MMA against a boxing guy, and Tony saying, oh, he's going to come in and knock him out, and he barely lasted. I don't think he lasted the first round. He just basically got taken.
He may
down
not have lasted the first minute
and submitted. Yeah, from what I remember, it wasn't a great fight at all. Pretty disappointed the UFC even put on that fight. Pretty much up there with the whole CM Punk era that they had in the UFC to put James Toney there in the cage. But that'll be my pick.
What about you, Frank?
It's easy for me. It's Thunder Lips versus Rocky Balboa.
That's not even a real fight, though.
or is it? I mean,
Or
some
is
of these celebrity matches aren't real fights either. I mean, they're
True.
a joke too. So,
True.
I mean, the thing that really got me in that fight was I think Rocky was, it really felt like it was just for charity and they were going to take it easy. And I think Thunder Lips got a little out of control. But in the end, charity won. All right, you guys ready?
Yeah.
Thank you. If you had to choose one, which active UFC fighter would you like to see box against Jake Paul? Because I think everybody wants to see Jake Paul get hurt.
Yeah, and it's got to be somebody like somewhat near his weight. So like I can't just say, oh, how about Francis Ngannou, who would kill him, like literally kill him, but he's just too big. It's just like wouldn't be realistic. I actually would not mind seeing the guy that Jake Paul has now been calling out. George Masvidal. I don't know why his name escaped my brain. So he's been calling out George Masvidal. I would actually like that because I know Masvidal would take it super seriously and like he would try really hard to butcher Jake Paul. Like he wouldn't go in there thinking, oh, I'm going to help put on a show. This is going to be fun. Like Jorge Masvidal would try to kill him and it would be kind of fun to watch. So I actually would not mind that. The guy that he's actually been calling out. And guys, the only reason why Jake Paul is calling out Jorge Masvidal is because he knows it'll never happen. Like that's why he's calling him out is because, hey, I can sound all tough. Let me call out a guy who could kick my ass because I know he's contractually obligated not to fight me. But no, I would like to see it.
Alex, you took my pick, man. That was going to be my pick, so I don't have that much to say. He will take it. He would take it very serious.
What about Kamaru Usman? That'd be another good one.
Yeah, Kamaru maybe. But I feel like I don't feel like Kamaru would take him that serious as Jorge Masvidal would. And kind of going back to his backyard brawling days, I think he would really take it serious. So you took my pick. So sorry, Frank.
Alex, I cannot believe that you didn't make this selection. Who is back as an active UFC fighter who you'd love to see get in there and give the two middle fingers? Nick Diaz. Yeah. I mean, how great would that be?
I don't know. I haven't seen him in 6 years. I'm a little worried.
Nick and Nate are boxers.
Yeah.
I mean, they are actually boxers. There's not that many of them on the UFC roster who really could be professional boxing guys, and Nick and Nate, both of that. Nick has the size. He would bring the animosity and the nastiness. I think you'd see Jake Paul. I think you'd see his corner throwing the towel by round 3. I think he'd be just terrified about what was happening to him. I just can't believe you wouldn't have chosen him.
I wanted you to. Yeah, you passed my test.
The next 3 UFC pay-per-view headliners will be Volkanovski versus Ortega, Blachowicz versus Teixeira, and Usman versus Covington. Which of those 3 fights will be the most entertaining?
Oh, man. I mean, I think it's going to be the same one that I'm looking forward to most because they had a good fight the first time around. I'm going to go with Usman versus Covington. That's the biggest of those 3 fights. I think that's going to be the highest selling out of those 3 fights. Although Volkanovski versus Ortega, they have the benefit of also having Nick Diaz, Robbie Lawler on the card, so that might help the sell. But no, the best and the biggest of those 3 main events, I also think it's going to be the best fight because I give Colby Covington a lot of credit. He was doing really well against Kamaru Usman in their first encounter. And, he's been very inactive. So I hope ring rust or octagon rust doesn't play a big factor for Colby. And I'm not even saying I want him to win the fight. I just want it to be the best possible fight. I want him to give Usman the best possible test because that guy's cleaning out the division. He's such a dominant champion. So I'm going to go with that one. I'm going to go with Usman versus Covington.
Yep, I think that's an easy answer. That fight could be fight of the year. Definitely one of the most anticipated. Will sell a ton. And also, don't sleep on the undercard fight on the MSG card. Michael Chandler, Justin Gaethje. That's really one that I'm really looking forward to a ton. Maybe just as much as Usman and Covington, even though that isn't, Chandler and Gaethje isn't for a belt. I think that one could really be fireworks, especially in 3 rounds where I think none of those guys are going to back up. They're just going to go forward and make it exciting.
I hope you're right about that. And, speaking of Michael Chandler, I hope that fight actually happens because if it stays in New York and his resistance to getting a vaccine could mean he exits that card because he's indicated now in follow-up interviews he has no intention of getting the shot. I heard Ariel Helwani say that they're actually not requiring vaccines. I don't know if that's like a misunderstanding or if they changed the rule or something. That would be an interesting move that you have to have it to go into the building to watch
but not to be the person. I think that's what it is. I think that's what it is. I was watching the MMA Hour, which it's like 6 hours long. So, forgive me if I miss a couple details, but during like his Q&A segment, I think Helwani said that the fighters will not be required to be vaccinated. I guess the attendees will, but not the actual fight. And I guess like it kind of makes sense because the event officials and the doctors and stuff, like they can examine the fighters and make sure that even if you're not vaccinated, you don't have COVID, whereas they can't do that so easily with the people coming in to watch it.
Yeah, and then when you break down the other fights, I agree with you guys on Usman Covington. I think it's easy. Volkanovski, Ortega, I don't believe in Ortega. I believe that he's a good fighter. I don't believe that he's that next level kind of fighter. I just don't buy the hype on him. And I think Volkanovski's just way, way too fast. And then when it comes to Jan, I just think he's in his peak right now. And Glover's really old. He's a very talented guy, and he's put on a run in a division that has suddenly become so uninteresting, which is just amazing when you consider that it was the premier weight class for so long in the UFC, and now it's just devoid of really any interesting fighters whatsoever. So, Glover ran through a division that just doesn't have much of interest in it anyway. So that fight I think that fight will be lopsided too. So, Usman is on the precipice of being George St. Pierre in terms of cleaning out the division. Now he's going over previous opponents. He gets through this and he's on his way to being perhaps the most dominant welterweight champion of all time, which would be incredible if George St. Pierre could be eclipsed in that way. And the only thing that I can really see standing in the way of that is Colby Covington.
By the way, quick side note. This is like an extra toss-up question because you brought up how the light heavyweight division used to be the glamour division of the UFC. What was you guys' favorite era of light heavyweight? Because for me, it was right around like 09, 010. When right during the John Jones ascension, like when he became champion, because at that point you had John Jones entering his prime, you had Shogun at the tail end of his prime, Rashad Evans in the prime, Rampage Jackson in the prime, Lyoto Machida right around his prime. Like, dude, you had some of the greatest ever all active at that one era of the light heavyweight division. John Jones cleaned out that division like 3 times. So kudos to him. But we've seen nothing like that for the last 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it were just so many good fights. Rashad had great fights with Rampage. Rashad had a good fight with Machida where he lost. Had John Jones pretty much beating all of them. So they all fought each other. That's the thing. I feel like nowadays in the UFC, sometimes you have so many fighters avoiding fighters that you don't get that anymore. Where all the top guys in that light heavyweight division fought each other at that time, and I think that really made everything exciting at that point.
Thank you.
Yeah, my favorite was just preceding John Jones, I guess, or before he actually took Shogun out, because at that time, you had Chuck Liddell lose to Rampage Jackson, and then as you just were pointing out, James, then you had all these really electric personalities, really engaging fighters that fans really wanted to get behind. Rashad Evans, Lyoto Machida, and so on, Forrest Griffin, all fighting each other. Shogun Rua. It was a really exciting time for the division. And then I will never understand how they could hold John Jones back as long as they did. What the thinking was, I mean, just imagine if Rashad Evans had not gotten injured, how much longer would they have kept him fighting the people in the rear end of that division, waiting for the opportunity? Because as soon as they let him go, I mean, the rest was history.
Yep.
Got one more toss-up?
No, I don't. Did I?
Yeah.
Oh, I did? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, you're right. There's one more. Sorry. I had it minimized on the screen.
Right.
Do you judge a person when they tell you Conor McGregor is their favorite MMA fighter?
Yes. Basically, when somebody tells me Conor McGregor is their favorite fighter, I'm thinking, like, the people do these like memes on social media. Tell me you're not a real fight fan without telling me you're not a real fight fan. Because if Conor McGregor is your favorite fighter, it's just because that's literally the only time you're motivated to watch a fight. Oh, McGregor's fighting? Yeah. Well, let me pay $70 to watch this guy lose again. Like, that's my favorite because he talks a lot of shit. And listen, like Conor McGregor, we kind of forget because we don't forget, but people may forget because it's been a long time. Like, he used to have a ton of mystique. I mean, they gave him the blackout treatment when he was like a prelim fighter when he first got to the UFC, and he was extremely tough to figure out. He embarrassed our friend Marcus Brimage, who I don't think we've heard from since. Like, I don't know what happened to that dude. He used to come into studio with us all the time. Frank disappeared off the face of the earth. He knocked out Jose Aldo in like less than a minute, and Chad Mendez. Like, he was beating everybody, McGregor, and then I guess just more and more doesn't have the eye of the tiger anymore. Just doesn't, unfortunately, hasn't improved when it comes to defensive wrestling. And the guy's been exposed time and time and time again. But he's the loudest. He's the most brash. He's in the most commercials. He's the most famous. I don't necessarily judge you if you're a fan of his, but if you tell me that's your favorite fighter, especially your favorite fighter of all time, I absolutely judge you. Have you not heard of Georges St. Pierre? Have you not heard of Anderson Silva, John Jones, Fedor, the Diaz brothers? If you really want to get into it, you're not a real fight fan if Conor McGregor is your favorite. Oh, BJ Penn, thank you. That's another good one. I can respect. If you tell me BJ Penn or Randy Couture is your favorite fighter or Chuck Liddell, I can respect that. I cannot respect Conor McGregor being your favorite fighter.
Yeah, I agree with all those points that, if Conor's your favorite fighter, I do typically typecast that, okay, they're not really, deep MMA fans. They may only know about 5 fighters. The thing about Conor fans that get to me, and I like Conor McGregor. I'm not a Conor McGregor fan. But those that really, like Conor McGregor seem to be a bit delusional. They seem to think he's the GOAT, or something like that, his run was the greatest run and he could beat everybody on the UFC roster and things like that. That's the part that I really don't like. You could be a fan of someone, but also be realistic, and know that, he's not the best in his weight class right now. He's on a losing streak. He's not the same fighter he was 5 years ago, in his prime and things like that. You could still be a fan of him and all those things still be true. But it seems like there's a segment of Conor fans that seem to have that delusional, issue about them that they still think that he's the fighter that had that mystique 5 years ago. That's the only part that I don't like.
Guys, he's a gateway drug. I mean, look, anyone that tells me that, I just say, great. Now you've gotten addicted to at least that fighter, and maybe you'll start to learn more about the sport and get more interested in it. I mean, that's really what he is. And look, I don't blame people. I mean, he was all the league would market. He was all they would talk about. It was the only pay-per-views that were really selling over the last couple of years, and they just keep embracing him despite some of the antics that we're starting to show, throwing a chair through a bus window, etc. I mean, it was Conor all the time for the UFC. So I don't blame the people that are passionate about him. You're right. They don't know much about the sport yet, but look, I'm going to make a big revelation here. My mother tells me all the time, her favorite fighter, Conor McGregor.
Oh no.
Yeah. So.
My mom hates him because she doesn't like trash talkers.
And she doesn't like Irish people is probably what it is, right? It's an Italian
that's what it's
thing.
becoming.
Yeah.
Well, my mom's not Italian. My dad is.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is she? She Irish?
Swedish, like, but way down the line. Like,
Okay.
She grew up here. Her parents did too. By the way, I'm glad Alex M put this in the chat because he's 100% right. We need Nate Diaz versus Vicente Lucay. How has that fight not been announced? Like, I don't understand what the holdup is. They want to fight each other. Lucay called out Diaz. Diaz is actually into it, which that's the biggest hurdle.
Yeah.
Like anytime you're trying to convince a Diaz brother to fight, the biggest hurdle is convincing them that opponent is worth their time and their training, because these guys usually, will just, hold out for something that's going to pay them 7 figures. Vicente Lucay has been on an absolute tear. And for Vicente, like, this makes a lot of sense for him, because some people might say, well, Diaz is not there in the rankings with Lucay. No, who cares? He's trying to fight a high-profile opponent that's going to make him some money. So this makes too much sense. But okay, well, hold on. I'll get you guys' take in a moment, but I want to bring in Dean Thomas, because he is with us now. MMA coach to the stars, UFC broadcaster, reality TV show star. Dean, let me ask you, doesn't this Vicente Lucay, Nate Diaz, this makes too much sense, and the guys both want it?
Yeah, I mean, it's not that it makes sense. It's just they both want it. So anytime Nate Diaz wants a fight, then it makes sense because he wants it. Because it's hard enough to get him to get motivated to fight anyway. So if he's willing to take the fight, then they need to make it happen.
Who would you favor in that fight? Please tell me Diaz.
I mean, it depends on 3 or 5 rounds.
5 rounds, then.
5, yeah.
Yeah.
If it's 5 rounds, and I say it's 50-50. If it's 3 rounds, I'm favoring Lucay.
Dean, please, I've been talking earlier that Michael Chandler, Justin Gaethje is the fight I'm looking forward to the most for the rest of the year. Please break down that fight for me, and I wish the fight was tomorrow, but break it down for me. What do you see from that?
I mean, that's a crazy fight because Michael Chandler is a great athlete and a great competitor, but I think Gaethje's the better fighter, the more fighter of the two. So Chandler's got to keep it in the more athletic sports realm of a fight, and not get caught up in a fight and get hit with a shot, because that's the thing, is that Chandler won't be able to take many of Gaethje's punches, so he can't get hit a lot. So he's got to have a smart game plan to keep him from getting hit. He also don't want to take a lot of leg kicks. So to me, I kind of favor Gaethje in this fight just for that reason. But Chandler can definitely pull it off if he keeps it competitive and just wins the rounds. Just try to win the rounds. He may even be able to find a finish somewhere, but he can't get suckered into a brawl, kind of like what happened with Charles Oliveira, where he just got stuck in the pocket. He can't get stuck in the pocket with Gaethje at all.
You got anything, Frank?
Yeah, when are we starting my training, bro?
Did you kick the rocks?
I kicked the rocks. I've been kicking rocks for a week.
Okay, I just want to make sure you're kicking rocks, because listen, I'm like Mr. Miyagi, right? So that's the beginning of it.
Don't make me pay the fence, bro.
No, man, no. Listen, we're gonna start your training, and once we get that going, you know what I'm saying, we got to get you a fight though.
Okay, I'm ready.
Yeah.
Is there anybody at any of the gyms you frequent who you think might be a good matchup with Frank, who won't kill him necessarily?
Hector Lombard.
Is he still around? Oh no.
I don't know, man, but I'm gonna call and find out if he's willing to fight Frank.
Oh no.
He will not hesitate. No, but and in all seriousness, and Frank is in good shape for an older fella. Like he keeps himself in excellent physical condition, and he is the world's. You're welcome. And he is the world's most dangerous white belt. Like he refused to upgrade his belt until he was ready for a black belt, so he is still at a white belt for that reason. How do you think a man of Frank's age, who again is in good physical condition, would hold up in like the first day of training? Is he going to be puking, or do you think he can excel?
Well, that's the thing, is it, obviously training camps are designed to escalate. So they always start in a certain place where it's manageable. But I think for Frank, we're going to do the exact opposite. We're going to treat his training camp like he's starting in the middle. So I'm going to make sure that he has a rough time with this.
Hey, thank you. Thanks, Coach.
It's going to take a couple. In the first day is never really the worst. It's the accumulation and the fact that, like, just when you thought you had enough rest, it's time to train again. And then you go back to sleep, and then it's time to train again. And then it's time to train again. And you're like, oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Dean, I wanted to ask you about a real fighter, not Frank. on this one.
Sorry.
Wait a minute. Machine Gun Kelly?
Oh man, crazy world of MMA. Leon Edwards is in an interesting spot. He's waiting for a title shot, but a lot of the guys that he had called out previously, when they were sort of above him in the rankings, the Jorge Masvidals and the Gilbert Burns, those guys that he wanted to fight on the way up, that he ended up not fighting. Now those guys want to fight him. And now he's kind of turned the tables and said that now he doesn't, he's waiting for his, for his title shot. He had done enough for a title shot. Can you just talk about the interesting spot that he's in and sort of compare eras a little bit? Because we were just talking about the light heavyweight division 10, 15 years ago when everyone fought everybody. Rashad fought Machida fought, just everybody sort of fought everybody. And now where it's more of a political game and, guys are kind of waiting their turn to try to get the easy road to the title shot.
Well, it's really kind of that division, right? Like it's really kind of the welterweight division that does that. And I think it's because there's so many people in that division that they can rack up 5, 6, 7, 8 wins against, regular guys and then beat one good guy and be like, yo, I'm on a 9-fight winning streak. Yeah. So it's easy to do that. And then you can prove a case for that. But like, it's really comes down to like, are you beating, top 10 guys? Like if you're not beating top 10 guys, then especially in that division, then you can't really, cry when you don't get a title shot. I don't really like that anyway, where guys are like, oh, I need to wait. I'm waiting for my title shot. I'm waiting for my title shot. To me, that's not the real sign of a champion. Unless there's like an age factor where it's like, and I know you talk about this all the time, where Jacare Souza, he had an age factor where it was like, all right, let's hurry up and get him a title. Let's let him wait and get a title shot. But he didn't wait. He took the fight and lost, so. But to me, it's like, if you take a fight and lose, then you're not the champion anyway. Yeah, you're not good enough to be champion anyway. So in my opinion, if you get offered, if you get a title shot, or if you're not offered a title shot, you got to take the fights, because if you're the champ, you should be able to win. And if you're, like, to me, it's just a shortcut. Yeah, it's a shortcut. You got to be able to win the fights. So I don't like when guys hold out. I don't like it. So I don't think Leon should hold out. Like he wanted to fight them guys before. Fight them now. If you're better than them, you're going to beat them.
And I know we're getting agreement in the chat because Alex M writes in, I hate that squatting on the spot thing, like squatting on. And even it's like, it's one thing if they tell you you're the number one contender, but if like, maybe I can be, so I'm just going to kind of wait around until I am. Nah, I'm not a fan of it.
A lot of these guys are declaring themselves as title worthy. Like, it's like, wait a minute, who said you can do this? You're not the matchmaker. You don't know from a business perspective what they want. So listen, you got to fight the fights. That's the way I see it.
And Dean, as a follow-up, how was matchmaking in your era?
How was matchmaking in my era?
Yeah, when you were getting fights and everything, how did that go?
I remember it was a time where they would just be like, hey, listen, these 3 guys need fights. Which one do you want? And it was like, and I remember that. It was like, I remember that's how I fought Clay Guida. It was like you can fight Clay Guida, Tyson Griffin, or I can't remember the third one. And I was like, give me Clay. Let's see what happens. Yeah, that's just how it was. It was like, or they just told you who you were fighting. That's how I fought Matt Serra. It was like, hey, you're fighting Matt Serra next time. And I was like, all right, cool.
Hey, Dean, speaking of the welterweight division, because you were just using that division as an example, this fight that's coming up with Usman and Covington, the rematch, I was talking earlier in the show, do you think if Usman gets past Covington, I feel like for him, the path opens up to potentially be greater than George St. Pierre in terms of a title run dominance? Do you see it that way, or do you see more potential speed bumps ahead for him that I don't see?
No, I don't. I still see that same type of potential because of his style and because of the fact that he's still getting better. We haven't seen him slowing down at all. Like he's still rising, and that's a scary thought for a guy who rarely loses rounds. You know, I mean, he rarely loses rounds in fights. And the fact that he's still getting better, he's looked better with each performance, it's pretty scary. So, you know, he's already beaten the best guys in the division. You know, a rematch with Colby, I don't even think that this is going to be as competitive as the first time. I think Gilbert Burns still gives him problems. So I think Gilbert just, you know, he learned a lot from that fight. I still think he gives him problems. But I think, you know, as long as he stays away from Gilbert, because Gilbert's still getting better too.
Yeah.
But, you know, as long as he stays away from him, I think that he just dominates everybody.
Now, we got an interesting question in the chat from Alex M. He says, who wins in a welterweight UFC tournament or Grand Prix? Now, I'm just going to assume we take Usman out of it. Like, he's not part of the Grand Prix, because if he's in there, he's winning the Grand Prix. So if you were to take Usman out and have a Grand Prix, like with all the contenders, Dean, I would probably lean to Covington winning it, because I think his wrestling could negate a lot of people. If not him, Burns, who do you think would win a welterweight Grand Prix?
So a Grand Prix, would that be, I mean, are there a lot of factors involved in this? Like, are they fighting twice in a night?
Let's go twice in a night. It makes it more fun, because that's the Grand Prix. Like the Grand Prix, like the Pride Grand Prix, is you fought twice in a night. Yeah.
If you're fighting twice in a night, Gilbert Burns wins that. Ooh. If you open it up to being, you know, a couple of, you know, spacing it out, it's between Gilbert Burns and Leon Edwards. So, because I think those other guys get hurt in the process. I think Leon Edwards gets hurt. And if it's more than one in a night, Leon Edwards won't make it to the second fight. I think he's like, all right, I'm a little banged up. I can't make it to the next one. But I think Gilbert Burns is the most durable, most athletic, and most skilled guy in the division.
Well, that's a good point, Alex, that he makes, because, you know, Colby, who I would have leaned that way too until what he just explained, he's small for the division. I mean, you know, he really is. So, I mean, you saw his jaw get broken in his last fight with Usman. So you're probably right. The wear and tear in a tournament like that would be tough. Most guys Colby's size would fight at 155, wouldn't they, Dean?
Yeah, and you know, and that's not only that, but there are other factors too. Like, you know, there's some pretty dangerous matchups for Colby still, I think, in that division. I think he gets through Leon, to be honest with you. Yeah. But I think Burns is dangerous for him. And believe it or not, I think Bilal Muhammad is a dangerous fight for Colby. Mm-hmm. I think Bilal Muhammad beats Colby.
Wow.
We're joined here by 9-time UFC fighter Dean Thomas, who joins us. He's also part of the commentary team, and I really enjoy the insight that he adds. Reality show star, radio star in Palm Beach. There's nothing this guy doesn't do. I do want to ask you about a couple of fights this weekend, UFC and in Bellator. Let me start in Bellator, because we hadn't brought it up on the show yet. We have our old friend, really nice dude, Yoel Romero, South Florida's own, taking on Phil Davis. Now, Phil Davis has never been stopped before. Yoel has those very heavy hands. Who do you think comes out on top there, Dean? Yoel Romero or Phil Davis?
I think Yoel Romero does. You know, everybody says, you know, he's never been stopped, but nobody's ever been stopped until they've been stopped. So
right.
This could be the time where he gets stopped. You know, the thing is with Yoel Romero is that he's always been, and I said this yesterday on my Sirius show, he's always been a slow starter. But I think a lot of that is attributed to, you know, fighting in the UFC is different. Like it's different from any other organization in the world. Like there's this pressure on your back where you almost feel like you have to be perfect. And it causes guys to just kind of chill. But when guys are able to fight in other organizations and are able to really let loose and get comfortable, they tend to fight better. If Yoel Romero comes out extremely comfortable against Phil Davis, I see him getting on the inside and just kind of ripping him apart, because there's no way Phil Davis takes him down consistently and can hold him down consistently. And there's no way Phil Davis can be able to take a barrage of punches if Yoel Romero decides to just rush him and get in on him.
And in the UFC on Saturday, we have very well-traveled Anthony Smith, who is on a 2-fight winning streak, taking on an ascending guy in the light heavyweight division in Ryan Spann, who's really explosive. He's got a lot of power. I think he's 4-1 now in the UFC. Who do you see coming on top there?
I like Anthony Smith in that fight. I think his experience will be the biggest factor. you know, he's seen everything. I mean, we're talking about a guy with over 50 fights, and he's still relatively young too. So like, he's still got hunger and he's still training hard, but he's got so much experience. Ryan Spann don't have a lot of experience, have the experience that Anthony Smith has. And I think that he's going to be able to use it to an advantage. You know, like the mistakes that young guys make, Anthony Smith is going to be able to get him in them spots and get him to make some of those mistakes. And you also got to think too, Ryan Spann is more of a, he's got power in his hands. Can't take that away from him, but he's more of a ground guy. But Anthony Smith is a better ground guy. So I like him in this fight.
You got anything coming up to promote, Dean? You doing any commentary, any appearances? What do you have?
Man, I'm going to be doing the desk for the UFC, not this weekend, but the next 3 weekends in a row. So y'all can catch me on ESPN doing that. So check me out on that. But then just y'all can, you know, you can check me on my Sirius show,
Nice.
MMA Today. Yeah.
What time you on?
I'm on Tuesdays and Wednesdays from 12 to 2.
Nice.
Okay.
I will check that out. I like that.
Don't worry, I'm not competing with y'all.
Well, actually, you are competing with me because I go live at noon every day.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, but I'm done at 1, so I'll tune in from 1 to 2.
So from 1 to 2, come check us out.
Oh man, good stuff here as always. 9-time UFC veteran Dean Thomas. Thank you so much for taking the time. Enjoy the break this weekend. Although knowing you probably, even if you're not on the UFC desk, you'll find something else to take up your time, and then enjoy the commentary.
I almost forgot, and this is, you guys can appreciate this. On Sunday, I'm actually getting inducted into the Florida MMA Hall of Fame.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's so like that's also what I got going on. So yeah, I'm finally, hard work is being recognized.
That's so cool, man. So I knew you would have something going this weekend.
Only a badass like Dean Thomas would forget that. Oh, and by the way,
I forget that. So,
where is the Florida?
Guys,
where is the Florida MMA Hall of Fame?
It's in Tampa.
Okay.
Yeah, it's in Tampa.
All right. Well, good luck, man. I hope if I can find some video of your speech, I would love to check that out.
I'll be like, and I want to thank Alex Donno for taking care of me at Fight Time Promotions.
Yes, exactly. And man, put in a good word for Frank Zaffere. I want him in that Hall of Fame too.
For sure, man. For sure.
Well, thank you so much, boys. Man.
I appreciate you guys.
Enjoy your weekend. Congratulations. And yeah, Frank, you brought up a great point. Only a busy guy like Dean Thomas, who's on the UFC desk like 3 weeks ago, only he could forget. Oh yeah, I'm being inducted into the Hall of Fame this weekend. By the way,
it's very gratifying to see all the success he's having, because when I first got to know him through Alex, like his personality is so dynamic. He's so talented in so many different ways that I couldn't understand how he wasn't a huge star already with the various outlets that were available and emerging. And to see it finally come to fruition is really cool. Yeah. And for him to still talk to guys like us is even cooler.
That's true. And what I really like from Dean, and this is coming from a former reporter, from a reporter's perspective, is he knows how to make the complicated simple. And he can take something that's complicated, a complicated scenario in MMA, and break it down simple to the casual fan and to the hardcore fans, like us. So that's a skill that you can't really teach, that it seems like really comes naturally for him. And that's what I think separates him.
Yeah. And he's not afraid to say the things that aren't like politically correct. So like I remember Alex and I asked him about cornering fighters and what do you say to them? And he goes, they don't hear anything you say in the corner. They're completely checked out. They've been hit 100 times. They hear blah, 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 water. So it was really, those kinds of insights have been really impressive.
And by the way, I did see this shortly before Alex put this in the chat. So, we talked a little bit earlier about the Joseph Benavidez retirement. We also today, I think the Benavidez retirement was, yesterday. Today, we get a retirement from Carlos Condit. And listen, great career. I'm still a little bit bitter about the time he stole a decision from Nick Diaz, though I will admit I was a big fan of Carlos Condit before that, not so much after that. But listen, it's been obvious for the last couple of years that the prime was not there. So I'm happy for Condit. I mean, an incredible career, even though he didn't get the actual UFC belt. He did hold an interim title for what that's worth. Didn't get the actual belt. Condit was a fine fighter, a gentleman. I did have the opportunity to interview him several times. Always a really, really nice dude. So happy trails to Condit. Well, what's you guys' favorite Carlos Condit memory? Because he had some awesome fight. Even going back to the WEC. Well, what is yours, Frank?
Just that leg kick into the side of George St. Pierre's head that almost stopped everybody's heart. Because I thought he'd won the fight when that connected. I thought that was it. I thought he was the new champion. Obviously, the fight went George's way. He proved to be pretty tough, but that's my Carlos Condit moment.
And how about the knockout of Dan Hardy?
I stole yours earlier. You stole mine now.
Both of them threw at the same time. He connected just a half a second earlier. Yeah. And, both of them could have been knocked out had he been a half a second late, but he was a half second early, got that dynamic knockout of Dan Hardy.
Yeah, no, you totally right. The words right out of my mouth. It was unbelievable. They both threw simultaneous left hooks. It was like, and we never actually saw what happened, but you remember, Frank, at the very end of Rocky III, when Apollo and Rocky, they decided to have their little behind closed doors rematch, the trilogy fight. And then the movie cuts off right when they're throwing like twin punches, simultaneous punches.
I think Rocky won that one. Because his punch, it was inside. It was tighter. I think he was going to take him with that punch.
Fair enough. In a short while, we got an update from Kevin Iole. He's scheduled for 7:00. He might be on time, might be a few minutes late. He's actually on a call right now with Valentina Shevchenko. So whenever he's done with that, he's going to hop in and join us. But before we bring in Mr. Iole, I wanted to talk about resurrecting features. This is a feature that James and I used to do months ago when we were on Onside Radio together. We're each going to give a kudo and a complaint in a segment we call Kudos and Complaints. So let's go through the kudos first, guys. My kudo tonight goes to the UFC for actually giving us a breather last week, right? Because it's very rare these days they take a weekend off, and I think we all need it. In fact, I don't think we would mind too much another breather this week because they're putting on way too many events. And listen, I know that they've got TV contracts to live up to, streaming contracts with ESPN. They have a lot of fighters under contract. They're trying to give fights. I get it. The product, though, does get a little diluted. So don't get me wrong. I love fights, but I like big fights and good fights. And when you stretch the cards these thin, it does eat into the quality a little bit. So I actually thought it was kind of nice that they gave us a breather. And it was also nice last weekend because there was so much going on. NFL Week 1 on Sunday. I had to kind of get mentally up for that. College football Saturday. We did have the Triller event last weekend, which was an absolute sham and a farce. But I give my kudos to the UFC for taking a breather. James, you can go next. What do you got?
So my kudos, and I don't know if you guys have seen this, but Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson has agreed to a mixed rules fight in December. He's going to fight MMA rules in alternate rounds along with Muay Thai. And I think it's an interesting concept. I know, celebrity bouts and all this stuff is getting all the rage, but I think Demetrius Johnson might be onto something. If you want to start mixing, different fighters from MMA and other disciplines to kind of make it even and have alternating rounds of mixed, mixed martial arts and whatever discipline your opponent may face. I think Demetrius Johnson is a little ahead of the curve. I think this might be the start of something that we might see in the next 2 or 3 years where we're mixing, combatants from other, disciplines, mix the rules up, makes it an even fight.
By the way, I like Alex is weighing in. Kudos to Dana for leading the way during COVID. Yeah, that was big. Listen, because the UFC set the blueprint for how to put on sporting events during a pandemic, right? Because they laid down the testing protocol, the bubbles. They had a bubble before the NBA had their bubble. The UFC had their bubble. So I give a lot of kudos to Dana. And also selfishly, if not for the UFC putting on fights in the relatively early days of the pandemic, I think it might have been like May or June when they started putting on events like May or June of 2020, that is. We had nothing to watch else at that point. New TV shows weren't coming out. New sporting events weren't happening. There wasn't shit going on outside of the UFC. So, yeah, I agree with that. And he also says Nick Diaz coming back, complaint. He says fighter pay, fair enough, and not letting Jake Paul fight someone under contract. But, Frank, go ahead and give your kudos.
My kudos is going to Triller because, for much of my life, one of my favorite all-time fighters, a fighter for whom I named one of my dogs after, Evander Holyfield. I never thought I'd get to see him again with boxing gloves on. And thanks to Oscar and Triller, I want to say thank you for letting me behold the spectacle that is Evander Holyfield walking into the ring one last time.
Now, my complaint, I'm going to stick with Triller because, digging up essentially a soon-to-be 59-year-old Evander Holyfield who can barely hold up his arms and walk in a straight line at this point. It was bad. I know Frank tried to talk me into thinking Holyfield was going to dominate. I wasn't buying it. I kept my blinders on. And I knew it was going to be bad, but I didn't think it was going to be, I'm going to swing a punch and I'm literally going to fall out of the ring bad. I didn't think it was going to be quite that bad. So that was embarrassing. I mean, James, I think you were the one who said it near the top of the show, or Frank, it might've been you. So I'll give you both credit for saying this, whichever one of you said it, that like they could have still done that event without replacing De La Hoya. Like they could have still done the event with Anderson Silva against Tito Ortiz. They didn't have to go out and exploit Evander Holyfield. And I feel bad for Evander because he probably needs the money. I don't think he's doing that if he didn't need the money. Several years ago, he did file for bankruptcy. So I don't know how he's doing financially, but I would imagine he's not doing very well if he's accepting that opportunity. So that is my complaint.
My complaint's in the UFC, and some people may see this as a kudo, but I think it's a bit of a forced trilogy between Brandon Moreno and Davison Figueroa.
That's a good one.
They were just announced for their third straight bout in December, and I just think it's indicative of that division that you have to have 3 straight title fights pitting the same 2 people. In that, and also I just think it's a forced trilogy. It's not something that people are necessarily clamoring for, like they have to fight a third time immediately. This fight could have happened a year from now. Just get some fresh blood in there. There's other people that probably deserve a title shot. And so I just think Figueroa versus Moreno for a third time in a row, I think is a bit of a forced trilogy that we don't have to see right now.
You're right. It's kind of like the dynamic that Frankie Edgar used to have to live through when they were just trying to get rid of him as champion. He had to beat everybody 3 times. Yeah. It's like the Austin Powers movie. Damn, 3 times. My shade I want to throw is against the very organization that I gave kudos to is Triller. They gave me Evander Holyfield, and then they left me with an embarrassment, and they left the lasting image that I will have of him now is throwing himself to the ground when he was trying to throw a punch. So as happy as I was to get the opportunity to be excited about Evander Holyfield fight again, oh my God, I feel so sorry for him. And let me tell you, Vitor Belfort, if you're listening, if you're within the sound of my voice, if you think you're tough, if you think you just beat a boxer, call out Mike Tyson because he'll fight on that Triller card. And he looked like he was in pretty good shape against Roy Jones. Yeah. So if you want to, or by the way, call Roy. Call either one of those cats, and let's see how you do. Because Mike Tyson does not have the speed issues that Evander Holyfield has. So
Tyson actually looked good, and I think that was the first Triller event, and Triller peaked with their first event. Because like the first event, they gave you Mike Tyson, who looked surprisingly good. And then ever since then, it's just like, I don't know. I don't know about this.
Man up, Vitor. Call him out. He's calling out Jake Paul. Call out Mike Tyson. Yeah. Go after another boxer. I want to see it happen.
By the way, I want to add a bonus complaint, and this probably should have been my original one. I almost forgot about this, but I remember coming across this story earlier this week. What a lame-ass excuse that Tyron Woodley is giving for not getting the tattoo, for not paying off the tattoo bet. He was riffing this week something about how, like, he said he claimed he was waiting for the tattoo artist, and the tattoo artist like didn't show up on time, so he didn't want to wait anymore. But like, so he was trying to blame it on the tattoo artist as if that's the only tattoo artist on planet Earth. Like, oh no, I didn't. Like, I promised if I lost the fight, I would get an "I love Jake Paul" tattoo. I lived up to it. I was a man of my word. And you bet your ass that if Tyron had won the fight, he would have expected Jake to live up to it. So don't be welching on that bet. That's a lame-ass excuse for him to say, well, I tried to get the tattoo, but the tattoo artist didn't show up on time, as if every city he travels to, there's not 100 tattoo artists everywhere. So lame. That's another complaint. I had to throw that one in. I mean, James, you weren't with us last week when we were talking about the tattoo bet and how Tyron was not going to live up to it. But how lame is that? Be a man of your word. Get the tat.
Yeah, it's pretty bad, to renege on a bet like that. But Jake Paul has some leverage. He said, hey, if you want the rematch, get the tattoo. So he can pull a huge, probably 7-figure payday away from Tyron Woodley. So is reneging on that bet worth the 7-figure payday that he's probably going to get for a rematch? I don't think so. So we'll see if he circles around and kind of comes to his senses.
By the way, I want to get into. Go ahead, Frank. I didn't want to cut you off.
No, I mean you guys have said it, but I mean it's another black eye for Tyron. I mean, there's nothing that is more emasculating than not living up to a bet, right, Alex Donno?
Yeah, I've welched on a few bets with Frank. I have. I knew he was going to bring that up. Yeah. As soon as I brought up this story, I'm like, oh, that's going to backfire on me.
Where's my pasta dinner, man? I mean, that's the only bet payoff that I really ever wanted to collect on. I want to come down to Palmetto Bay or wherever all the Donnos are, and have my pasta dinner.
I still got to make it happen. Yeah. You can talk politics with my parents. That'll be a trip. We do have to make it happen.
I was going to say the only fight I ever almost got in college was over a bet that was reneged by another person. I almost got into a fight over it. It was like $20. It was so stupid. I ended up going in the guy's dorm room and taking his PlayStation controller as collateral. And I said, if you want this controller back, give me the $20 or we could just fight it out. And, that was basically how it ended.
So I wanted to bring up one more story before Kevin Iole is able to hop in. He's finishing up a call with Valentina Shevchenko. And I do want to ask Kevin about this as well. Ariel Helwani dropped a report this week that there is going to be a new MMA league that they're attempting to launch by the year 2023. But they want to use an NFL/NBA type of model. Let me read you an excerpt of this story from MMAfighting.com. The combat sports landscape is about to get a whole lot bigger or a whole lot more cluttered, depending on how you look at it, when a new mixed martial arts league makes its 2023 debut, featuring revenue sharing, health insurance, and even a pension for those fighters who don't feel like waiting around for the MMAAA lawsuit. According to sources, this is the quote, I think, from Ariel. According to sources, a number of influential industry individuals have come together to create a new MMA league that is structured more like the NBA, NHL, NFL, rather than your typical MMA promotion, he said. This new league would also include an athlete association. It seems very weird for the league to offer that. That's not usually the way that these things come together. This is very, very odd, this whole story. They would include an athlete association that implements a collective bargaining agreement with 50-50 revenue share, guaranteed contracts, health insurance, career-ending insurance, and a pension plan. The plan is to announce the venture in the coming days, I'm told. They're hoping to launch in 2023. Now, my take on this, guys, and Frank, I'm going to go to you next. Hold on. I'm going to go to you. So, like, to the people who are all about, like, oh, God, we need better fighter pay and fighter unions. This is incredible. I can't wait for this. You got to take a step back and realize if it's not the UFC, this is not going to work. Like, how is some magical MMA promoter that doesn't have any of the UFC fighters under contract just going to appear and say, oh, hey, we're offering our fighters, we're giving you a union. Forget about Form U. We're giving you a union. We're giving you 50% of the revenue. We're giving you health insurance. We're giving you pensions. This sounds to me like a Ponzi scheme. Like, who are these people? What fighters do they have? Like, they're going to be bankrupt in a second if they're offering this stuff. You have to build up first, and then your fighters have to get leverage and fight for these things. Like, Frank, none of this makes sense.
Well, you can't pay for it. Exactly. It can't be paid for. All these things they're offering cannot be funded. I mean, James is the accountant, so he can speak to this. But I mean, like, to your point, the UFC is probably the only league right now that has the ability to negotiate a bargaining agreement like this and maybe start to fund some of these things. But, look, everyone talks about fighter pay. But if fighter pay was as bad a situation as it is made out to be, then the fighters would not be engaging in this sport any longer.
Right.
Or they would be going to competing leagues. I mean, I get that the UFC has a lot of leverage and control in terms of the prime market for mixed martial arts. But the fact is that a great number of these fighters that compete in mixed martial arts make a good bit of money. I mean, if the average fan knew how much money some of the middle of the road fighters are making, they would be very jealous. They would be very envious of that kind of income. So, I mean, I think people need to just take a step back and realize that, yes, this is an evolution that happens over time. But the most important part of the benefits package is somebody has to pay for it. And so you can't just this delusional league creation where they just imagine that every fighter is going to get up and walk out of their UFC contract because they're offering all these things. It's just pie in the sky.
I'm going to bring in Kevin Iole in a second, but James, give your take first, and then I want to ask Kevin about it in a moment.
Yeah, just real quick. I was going to say, is the overall talent pool in MMA that deep to sustain another league anyway? Forget about fighter pay and benefits and all that kind of stuff, but we're complaining right now that the UFC's fight night cards aren't deep enough. And then you have Bellator and PFL and one championships and all these things. Like the pool of talent in MMA right now is not deep enough to have another league and have it be high quality. So that they're working against that as well.
Alex M with the Fry Fest fighting. That's awesome.
Ja Rule is the commissioner. Let's bring in the man himself. Excellent boxing and MMA writer, yahoosports.com. The great Kevin Iole joins us. Kevin, good evening. And let's pick up on something we were just talking about here with this report of this new MMA league that wants to launch in 2023. I don't know if you know any maybe extra details about this, but like the idea, they're promising these things that sound incredible for fighters and for fans who care about fighter pay and fighter treatment. It sounds incredible, but I just don't know where the money is going to come from to deliver on this. Like, do you think something like this, Kevin, can work for a promotion that just appears out of nowhere?
Zero chance of working. And here's what I thought when you were going through it, Alex, and reading, what Ariel's report. They're talking about we're going to give healthcare, we're going to do this. Well, aren't those things that are collectively bargained, right? I mean, so they're saying what they're going to give, and yet they haven't even had a union to bargain with. I mean, so let's start from here. But I think it's great that if fighter, like for instance, when the new owners took over the UFC in 2016, I wrote, hey, give the fighters healthcare benefit plans, right? I think that's an important thing. So if the fighters get it, great. But I think James made a good point that, the talent pool is not enough. Frank, made a good point talking about, who's going to pay for this? Because look, there's businesses in this country that are going under because they can't afford to pay, these costs and everything. And now you're going to come in with a fight league that just off the top, I mean, where are you going to be ranked? You're not going to start at number 2 or number 3. You're going to start down the list, and you're going to pay all this kind of money into we're going to make it up and go up. Now, hey, I think if they get a league off the ground, they could allure some free agents and build it. But I think it's unrealistic. I think at this point in time, it's kind of like all these challengers to the NFL that came along. Before they were going to be legitimate challengers, and now they're trying to play in XFL's trying to play in the summer, so they're opposite of the NFL. And I think it's kind of like that. It's the public has decided that the UFC is the major league of mixed martial arts. The public decided that, not any of the 5 of us or 4 of us. The public decided that, and I think that's just the way it is right now.
Kevin, I really believe that if anyone wants to start a truly competitive league to the UFC, we got to go back to Alex's an idea from a few years ago. We got to go bayou to the idea of Steroid Island off the coast of Brazil, 40 years and older. TRT is back, and if you age out of the UFC and you get cut, you come to Steroid Island and you get to take testosterone, and we see what happens.
Well, I think that would be a fun argue with Scott Coker that's what he's been doing a lot of Bellator. True. And this bringing some of these guys in, the way that they fought. But I just think it's so difficult because the UFC is a marketing machine and a PR machine, and they have this thing down pat. And now you're going to have to go out there and you're going to have to convince the public to switch. And the hardcore fans will watch it because I'm amazed. Like I don't even think hardcore baseball fans are out there watching the kind of baseball that that hardcore MMA fans are, where they'll watch all the leagues that are streamed or televised, and go out there. I don't think you see many Major League Baseball fans watching, the AA leagues or the Class A leagues, right? They watch the majors. And I think it's a big challenge when you get to MMA and you're going to have to go out there and, compete with that marketing behemoth that is the UFC.
Kevin, I wanted to open up and ask you about something. I know you're passionate about this, and I saw you tweeting during the event. This just the sham that we saw in that Triller main event last week. Like Evander Holyfield, he probably needed the money, but it was a terrible, terrible idea to put him in the ring. Had been inactive for a decade and a half past his prime, if not longer. It was bad. And then he knocked himself down with his own punch and nearly fell out of the ring. I felt sad watching it. And you covered Evander a lot more closely than I did. What was going through your mind when you're watching that?
It was just disgusting. I mean, and I thought, it was exploitative, even though the fighters were being paid a lot of money. And that show is just going to be a disaster. It's going to bleed, losses. I mean, Holyfield made $5 million for that fight. Tito Ortiz made $1 million. I don't know what Vitor made, and I don't know what Anderson made, but I would say $1 million would probably be, for both of those guys. If Tito made $1 million, maybe Anderson made $2 million. Vitor was probably around that one. And now President Trump, he did not show up and get a check for $250 and spend his day there doing that. So I think that so they spent so much money on this show, and it was a disaster. And that money could be way better spent. And I just think there's somebody that has a death wish there. I don't know what it is, but it's trash. And I'm all for opportunities for fighters, but a nearly 60-year-old fighter, a mid 40-year-old fighter has no business being in the ring. Stop this nonsense.
Kevin, I was just complaining earlier about what I feel is a forced trilogy coming up between Moreno and Figueroa. Maybe I'm wrong. Just kind of explain to me how it came about. Again, it's rare that you see 3 consecutive fights between the same guy in consecutive fights.
I think, they were 1-1. So now, and you go, okay, is there a trilogy? It would have been Pantoja, but he wasn't going to be ready in December. So he needed to go next year. Moreno wanted to fight this year, had made that clear. So that way it was as simple as that. And so they just decided, hey, I don't have a big problem with them given, he's a former champion who had done well in that division, beat Moreno the first time. So, some people thought he was the fighter of the year last year. A lot of people thought he was the fighter of the year last year. So I don't have a problem with him getting the fight. I mean, I'm not crazy about rematches either, especially immediate rematches. But I think in this scenario, given, the circumstances that Pantoja wasn't going to be ready, Moreno wanted to fight, I think it's a fine alternative.
We're joined here by go ahead, Frank.
Oh, no, I didn't want to cut you off. I just says we're asking him for some fight analysis. One of my favorite fighters, Yoel Romero, over in Bellator now. What do you think of his fight with Phil Davis? How do you think that's going to go? You think he's going to be a new man at a new weight class and new organization?
Well, I sure hope that the Mohegan Tribe and Bellator have been testing him, because that's been something that has been an issue.
I'm sure they're not, by the way.
I think that hopefully that has happened. We'll see if it does or does not. I think Phil Davis, among all people, might be uniquely positioned to fight Yoel. He was a world-class wrestler himself. Certainly not to the level of Yoel, but a great wrestler himself. And then he's been more active, and so I kind of think that Davis disappoints me a lot, right? I think the tools are there to be more than what he is, but he does, he is a formidable guy when he's at the top of his game. And I think he's going to step up in this situation.
We're joined here by Kevin Iole, covers boxing and mixed martial arts for Yahoo Sports. Kevin, Vicente Lucay wants to fight Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz wants to fight Vicente Lucay. We have a couple of willing participants. What's the holdup? Do you think this fight gets signed?
I think there's a good chance. I think there's a good chance of it. I think the UFC has to find a place that it fits on the card. Like, in other words, UFC 268 is already an overloaded stack card, and you want to stack the cards, but you don't want to do it at the expense of other cards, right? So I think that's going to be, just finding a place for it. Finding when both guys are able to go and finding a place for it on the slot, on the roster. I mean, we got a lot of really good shows coming up. I would not be surprised to see it happen early next year and see it on the show headlined by Ngannou and Cyril Gane.
By the way, for this weekend coming up, we have Anthony Smith against Ryan Spann. An interesting fight. I agree with the analysis of Dean Thomas, who joined us earlier. I lean to Anthony Smith's experience, and I hate to say this to Anthony Smith, but I'd kind of like to see Ryan Spann win, because then this could be, the makings of a new contender emerging eventually. But how do you see the fight playing out?
I mean, who am I to argue with Dean Thomas? But in my betting column on Tuesday, I picked Anthony Smith for the very difference, of experience. I said, hey, they're similar fighters in the way they like to attack and what they like to do. Anthony Smith, I think, has gotten a lot better on his striking. I like the way, he's developed. And I think he's a better fighter now than when he fought John Jones, and he gave John Jones all he can handle. I think Ryan Spann is good, and I think Ryan Spann has a future. Although it's important to note, Ryan Spann is 30 years old. He's not like this, 22-year-old newbie coming up and going out there. He's been around a while too. But you're looking at Anthony Smith, and Anthony Smith has more finishes than Ryan Spann even has total fights. That means something. And I think the fact that he's been around and won so often and been so successful over such a long period, I like him to win this fight.
Kevin, something that's interesting to me right now is the position that Leon Edwards is in. The guys that he was calling out on the way up, the Jorge Masvidals, the Gilbert Burns of the world, now they're calling him out for a fight, and he's saying, nah, I know I called you out last year, 2 years ago, but I'd rather wait for a title shot. Just what are your thoughts on that, especially after calling them out prior, and now they're saying, okay, now we're calling you out, let's fight.
Well, I feel like he should be fighting Masvidal, to be honest with you. I mean, to me, that's the fight to make. They had the whatever you want to call it that happened after that fight in England when Masvidal went over and gave him the 3-piece and the soda. And I think that's the fight to make. And, Leon says, I want to wait for a championship. But, history has shown in the UFC, if you sit out and wait, normally good things don't happen. A fight with Jorge Masvidal is a big fight. You're going to make a lot of money. Going to get a lot of eyeballs. And the one thing that Leon Edwards doesn't have is he doesn't have a lot of name recognition. It's getting better, but he certainly does not have a lot of, name and face recognition among the casual UFC fans. You go in there and you beat a Masvidal after coming off a win over Nate Diaz. So you beat the two guys in the BMF fight, and then you go into a title fight. All of a sudden you're bringing something to the table there. And I think, you can make that a really big pay-per-view. So I think Leon, I understand why he wants to fight for the title. And, he got screwed more than anybody with the pandemic and all the stuff that went on and sat out for such a long period of time, really through no fault of his own. But I think he's making a mistake. I think he should fight. And I think a fight with Masvidal would be the one to make.
I would tend to agree. Good stuff here as always. Kevin Iole. You want to follow him on Twitter? You see the handle on the screen, or if you're just listening to this, it's at Kevin I. Check out his work at yahoosports.com. Anything, Kevin, you've got dropping this week? You mentioned the betting column. Can people find that yet, or is that dropped yet?
That came out on Tuesday, so that was up on Tuesday. I got stories up on Anthony Smith and Ryan Spann popped up today. So those are out. I've been doing Zooms with all the UFC 266 guys this week, so we'll look forward to those. I did Lauren Murphy, Valentina Shevchenko, Brian Ortega already today. I got Alex Volkanovski later tonight. So a lot of good stuff coming.
Nice.
Well, and a lot of great people you've spoken to today. Did anything really interesting come out of any of those calls today? I know you just got off of Shevchenko before you joined us.
Yeah, I started the morning. I actually filmed a TV show this morning. I went over the local Vegas PBS there, and they did a show about Muhammad Ali and boxing in Las Vegas to support the Ken Burns documentary that's going to be on starting on Sunday night. That I think people are going to want to watch on Ali's life and career. And so I did that, but I had Lauren Murphy before that, and I introduced her by saying Lauren Murphy, her nickname is Lucky, but I don't know that many people think she's lucky to get to fight Valentina Shevchenko. and so she said, "Hey, I do feel lucky to fight Shevchenko. I feel like this is my time, and I'm going to win the championship." And I brought that up to Shevchenko, and she. So I think Valentina, boy, I'll tell you what, she's a scary person.
That is tremendous. So yeah, everyone, make sure you check out Kevin's work, yahoosports.com, both on the MMA pages and on the boxing pages. Kevin, thank you so much, and enjoy your weekend coming up.
Always good to be with you guys. Thank you.
You too, man. What a pro. Awesome stuff there as always by Kevin. Lucky if she makes it past the first round, Alex writes. All right, so guys, we're going to go with tonight the code word if you want to win this delectable $20 gift card to the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill, quarterdeckrestaurants.com. Since we've been talking a lot about Leon Edwards, the first person to write either in our chat or on Twitter at Alex Donno, Leon, Leon is the code word. First person to type in Leon. Alex M says he can't spell. First person to type in Leon wins this $20 gift card to the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. It is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing. Any parting comments, guys, before we wrap it up in a few minutes? Some of the stuff we went through on this episode. Actually, I want to get all of our picks because I gave mine for Anthony Smith versus Ryan Spann this weekend. I would like to see Joseph Rodriguez writes in code word's Leon, bro. Try it again. I would actually like to see Ryan Spann win this fight because that's new blood. It's a fresh injection of new blood into this division. Really explosive puncher. Anthony Smith, though, I lean to his experience. And Leon, he got it. Alex M. It's on the way, sir. I think Alex follows me on Instagram. So I am going to I'm going to send him a message. Or Alex, if I don't send you a message first, send me a message on Instagram because I know you reached out to me on the gram about a week ago. So send me a DM and I'll get your address and we will send this $20 gift card your way, sir. So yeah, I'm going with Anthony Smith. I think he's probably going to win. I'm going to say a 5-round decision because the other thing about Ryan Spann is the cardio is very unproven. Like he's going to try to end Smith early with, a big hand out of the pocket. But I think if Smith can weather the storm and just lean on his experience and find a rhythm, I think he's going to outwork him for a 5-round decision. Frank, I'll go to you next. What do you think about Smith versus Spann?
I got Smith, and I also got to just say quickly, doesn't this feel like the division where Scott Coker kicked Dana White's ass? Don't you wish we still had Ryan Bader, Phil Davis? Don't you wish Yoel Romero had gone to 205 in the UFC? Like, what's going on? I mean, Anthony Smith, like, who cares?
Scotty Coke.
That's what I'm picking.
Yeah, good point. No, I'm not excited about this fight either, but I do think Anthony Smith wins it. He's one of those guys that's good enough to beat all the up and coming talent, but not really good enough to win a title. That's kind of the spot that he's in right now. So this is one of the up and comers that he'll probably derail, and then probably lose when he gets a chance against a top 3 or top 5 fighter.
Did you see, James, the latest antics from Conor McGregor? He's out at the VMAs this weekend, and he throws a drink at Machine Gun Kelly. And apparently the feud between them got so bad, Dana White actually called Conor and he called Machine Gun Kelly because he was trying to mediate. Apparently, it's all good. McGregor came out and said it was some kind of a misunderstanding. It's all good. But Conor finds a way to get himself in trouble, whether he's throwing hand carts or he's punching elderly people in bars in Ireland who happen to be the elderly fathers of mobsters and, having hits put out. Like he always finds trouble. He got arrested in Miami a while back. Like Conor always finds trouble. It's like, bro, you're rich. Just lay low, enjoy your money, enjoy life. You don't need to be doing stuff like this.
Yeah, it's another bad look for Conor, and like we've said before a couple times on this show, you just wonder if he's okay He seems happy, he seems, when you see him, he's celebrating and throwing money around and stuff like that. But money doesn't really buy happiness. And he may just be one of those kind of athletes that just couldn't handle all the immense fame and immense money that came with it. It's a shame because he worked very hard for it. He came from not much humble beginnings and really worked his way up to become one of the biggest, athletes and really in all of sports, most popular athletes anyway. And you just wonder if he's okay because it seems like just useless trouble. There's no point for him to get in trouble. This is the time for him to really chill out. He doesn't have anything to prove to anybody, especially when it comes to fighting, civilians. There's no point in doing that.
He definitely has a problem. You're right on the money. There's something wrong. I don't know what it is, but he just feels like he's on that collision course with something very, very bad. And now that his fighting career is all but lost in the UFC, he's filling a void with just antics. I don't know what's going to happen, but I don't think he's going to fight Dustin Poirier again.
No, I hope not anyway. No. I know he's going to try to, and Poirier probably wouldn't mind fighting him again just because it's the fattest check he can make, right? Like
look at Nate Diaz, Alex, with the last laugh. Right, they have their 2 fights, and now everybody's calling Nate out. Nobody's calling Conor out. They're done with him.
Great point.
Wow.
But Nate, he would fight Conor again if asked, right? Like he would fight Conor again because it's the biggest payday for him as well. Like Nate can make a nice check fighting Vicente Lucay, but the Vicente Lucay check compared to the check of a trilogy fight with Conor McGregor, that's not even close.
And it's a smaller guy, and I would think that Nate would think it's an easier fight. I don't know but Vicente Luke, bigger guy, ultra aggressive. That's a tough matchup for Nate. Conor's a much better matchup for Nate, especially being a smaller guy and not very well rounded. Strictly a striker. Where Vicente Luke is good on the ground, he's good standing up.
Nate would rather watch Conor be irrelevant. He'd rather fight the more dangerous guy and watch Conor be irrelevant.
I don't know about that. I think he wants to make a fat check. Well, that'll do it for us, my friends. Huge shout out to everybody who tuned in. Congratulations to Alex on the gift card. Thank you to Joseph as well, Manny, everybody in the live chat, everybody who's what. Make sure you spread the word, guys. Every Thursday, we're talking combat sports here on 5 Reasons YouTube. And make sure you check out the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. I saw Alex mention I'm going to mail him this gift card that he won, and he's going to take it down to the Dania Beach Pier. That location is awesome because you feel like you're on vacation when you're down there. You're right on the water. It's so great. And smash the like button and subscribe to 5 Reasons YouTube. Whether you're watching this live or watching the replay, doesn't matter. Smash the like button, subscribe. Really goes a long way to helping out the channel. So make sure you check out the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. Saturdays and Sundays, an awesome time to go. They got the 5 for $15 ice cold buckets of imported beer, Heineken and the Heineken family beer, High Noon Hard Seltzer. If you're into those, when I initially tried the hard seltzers, wasn't feeling it, but they grow on me. And I like the High Noon Hard Seltzer that they have at the Quarterdeck. So I could mix and match a couple of those with a few Heinekens and have a fantastic, fantastic time out there. So check out the 5 for $15 ice cold buckets. They have 2 for $1 happy hour all day, every day. That literally never ends at the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. The happy hour goes all the time. Watch every football game there, college and pro, and every UFC pay-per-view fight. In a couple of weeks, we have a pay-per-view. My guy Nick Diaz is fighting. I would not miss that. Wild horses couldn't drag me away. They have every UFC pay-per-view fight for zero cover charge at the Quarterdeck. The seafood is fresh. The sandwiches and burgers are absolutely delicious. You will love their baby back ribs. QuarterdeckRestaurants.com. The Quarterdeck, come for the food, stay for the fun. Huge shout out there and thank you to James, to Frank, to Manny Chang behind the scenes. Huge thanks to Kevin Iole and Dean Thomas for joining us. We will talk to you guys again next week on another episode of 5 Rounds here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.